Welcome, everyone, to a massive, completely spoiler-filled deep dive into one of the most debated eras in cinematic history.
Oh, heavily debated, for sure.
Exactly.
Mm.
I mean, just imagine, if you will, paying $4 billion for this sprawling, legendary estate.
A very expensive piece of real estate.
Yeah. And you buy it, and then you just throw away the original architect's blueprints. And then get it, you hire 3 different master builders.
But there's a catch, right?
Oh, there is a massive catch. You tell them to build it room by room, and they aren't really required to consult each other on the final layout at all.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. That is essentially the grand, chaotic experiment of the Star Wars sequel trilogy.
It really is a fascinating structural anomaly in filmmaking. And we've pulled together an enormous stack of sources for you today to really unpack this.
Lots to get through.
Definitely. We are looking at intensely passionate fan debates. Specifically, we're pulling from Reddit communities. So places like Raylo and the more critical Saltier than Crate.
Just to get the full spectrum of how fans reacted.
Exactly. We also have these granular behind-the-scenes production articles, plus leaked, verified script details for unmade versions of these films.
Which I am so excited to talk about later.
Oh, it's so good. We've also got a digital musicology analysis of John Williams' entire score and some incredibly candid retrospective interviews from the cast and crew.
Right. So the overarching mission today for us is to march chronologically through The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker.
But we aren't just, reciting plot points. That would be boring.
Yeah. If you're listening to this, you already know who Rey and Kylo Ren are.
You know the Millennium Falcon still flies.
Exactly. We are using the story as a spine to explore how the real-world baton passing of writers and directors completely dictated the mythology on your screen. What we want to get into is the why and the how.
Right. How does a multi-billion-dollar machine operate without a rigid master plan?
It's the ultimate question. Because before the iconic yellow opening crawl even rolls for The Force Awakens, the actual inciting incident for this entire trilogy happens in a boardroom.
Yeah, when Disney acquires Lucasfilm.
Right. And George Lucas, the creator of this entire universe, he actually had story treatments ready to go. He had a roadmap.
We did. He spent time working on them.
But Disney, now holding the keys to the kingdom, they opted to discard his treatments entirely and just, forge their own path.
And to really understand the mechanics of that decision, you have to look at the cultural and financial climate of the early 2010s.
Which we get some really great insight into from Bob Iger's memoir, right?
We do, because at that specific moment in time, the prequel trilogy was still carrying an immense amount of cultural baggage.
Oh, yeah. People were still really harsh on them back then.
Exactly. The modern wave of nostalgia, the kids who grew up on the prequels becoming adults who revere them, that hadn't really crested yet.
Right. The general public sentiment was still kind of, oh, the prequels ruined my childhood.
Exactly. So Disney, looking at this purely from a risk management perspective, desperately wanted to avoid any prequel backlash.
Makes sense from a business standpoint.
It does. They wanted a return to tactile filmmaking. They wanted something retro that echoed the comforting, lived-in aesthetic of the original trilogy.
But wait, I have to challenge that strategy right out of the gate.
Oh, for it.
Didn't that completely alienate the entire generation of fans who grew up on the prequels?
Oh, absolutely.
Because by playing it safe and trying to recreate 1977, wasn't Disney actually taking a massive creative risk by ignoring 20 years of world building? It feels like they were building a sequel to the original films while pretending the prequels were just like a bad dream.
Well, that is exactly the friction that George Lucas himself felt.
I bet he wasn't happy.
Not at all. The sources detail how Lucas really didn't hide his disappointment. He felt profoundly betrayed by the pivot.
Wow. Betrayed is a strong word.
Yeah, he pointed out that there was nothing fundamentally new in the sequel's early concepts. His philosophy for Star Wars was always that every single movie had to push boundaries.
Right, like new planets, new alien designs.
Exactly. New political structures, new technological leaps in filmmaking. But Disney just wanted the Millennium Falcon and X-Wings.
Nostalgia bait.
Essentially. And while selling the company was his choice, letting go of a universe he micromanaged for 4 decades and watching someone else paint by numbers in his sandbox, that was deeply painful for him.
Oh, I can't even imagine. And then, once Disney takes the wheel, the countdown clock just starts blaring.
Oh, the pressure was immense.
Because they promised their shareholders a brand new Star Wars movie in 2015. So they bring on Michael Arndt to write the script.
And Arndt is brilliant, by the way.
Right. This is the guy behind Toy Story 3 and Little Miss Sunshine. He is a master of these beautifully flawed, meticulously structured, emotionally devastating character arcs.
But there is a massive problem with this timeline.
Yeah. Arndt is an architect who needs time to lay a foundation, and Disney is basically asking for a skyscraper by Tuesday.
Exactly. The development crunch completely derailed the original timeline. Arndt was trying to craft this monumental script to balance legacy characters with new faces, but his process requires intense outlining and time.
Which they didn't have.
Right. He allegedly begged for more time, but Kathleen Kennedy and the Disney executives were entirely locked into that 2015 release date.
Because of the shareholders.
Exactly. So Arndt was let go, and J.J. Abrams, along with Lawrence Kasdan, who is a literal Star Wars legend, having co-written The Empire Strikes Back, they stepped in to take over.
It's like trying to build a spaceship while it's already in orbit.
It really is.
Abrams and Kasdan had to write this script in less than 6 months. 6 months to restart the biggest franchise in cinema history.
Which is virtually unheard of for a movie of this scale.
And that sheer rush leads to some wild, creative pivots. Just look at the very opening of The Force Awakens.
Oh, the original opening is fascinating.
Because we all know the final version, right? We start on the desert planet of Jakku. Poe Dameron gets the map to Luke Skywalker. The First Order attacks. It's a classic, propulsive Star Wars opening. But what was the original draft?
So the original script had Abrams opening with a shot of space. But instead of a Star Destroyer looming overhead, it was Luke Skywalker's severed hand.
Wait, his actual hand?
Yes, still clutching his blue lightsaber from the duel in The Empire Strikes Back, and it's just falling through the cosmos.
That is so dark.
Right. The camera would follow it as it enters a planet's atmosphere, burns up, and the lightsaber falls to the ground. The script originally charted this convoluted journey of how that specific weapon traveled through different hands over 30 years to end up with Maz Kanata.
I cannot even imagine the tonal whiplash of an audience reading a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, hearing John Williams' triumphant fanfare, and immediately panning down to a rotting, severed hand floating through the vacuum of space.
It definitely would have set a different tone.
It's so macabre. But, well, instead, they pivot to Poe Dameron, and we are introduced to our new core trio.
Right, which works much better.
And again, assuming you listening know the basics, what is really interesting here is the mechanics of how these characters are introduced to us, specifically to ground the universe. You have Rey scavenging on Jakku and Finn defecting from the First Order.
And setting up the First Order is where J.J. Abrams really planted his flag in terms of practical, tangible filmmaking.
He really wanted to get away from the CGI armies of the prequels.
Exactly. He wanted the stormtroopers to feel like real people in real armor, not digital clones. And because of that physical reality, the First Order ranks are actually filled with secret celebrity cameos hidden under those white bucket heads.
This is top-tier trivia right here.
Oh, it's great.
Because the stormtroopers holding Poe Dameron captive, that's Michael Giacchino, the incredible composer.
Yep.
You have Nigel Godrich, the producer for Radiohead, marching around in armor. And the absolute best one, when Rey is strapped to the interrogation chair and uses her very first Jedi mind trick to force a trooper to drop his weapon and leave the cell.
One of the best scenes in the movie.
That stormtrooper, designated FN 1824, is Daniel Craig, James Bond himself.
It's hilarious. He was filming Spectre on the exact same studio lot, wandered over, and essentially demanded to be put in a suit.
I love that. It speaks to the gravitational pull of the franchise.
Yeah.
Everyone wanted to be a physical part of it.
They did, and even the naming conventions were born from this tactile cinematic nostalgia.
Like Captain Phasma.
Exactly. Captain Phasma, the chrome-plated commander of these troopers, gets her name from a totally unexpected place.
Where did it come from?
Well, J.J. Abrams looked at her shiny armor, and it instantly reminded him of the lethal flying chrome ball, the Sentinel Sphere, from the 1979 cult horror film Phantasm.
Hey, really?
Yeah. So he just named her Phasma.
I love the idea that the DNA of a gritty 70s horror flick is just casually embedded into Star Wars lore.
It's a great little Easter egg.
But speaking of the physical reality of this movie, The Force Awakens was practically a marketing campaign for practical effects.
They really leaned into it.
You remember that early scene on Jakku where Rey frees BB-8 from a scavenger who is riding this massive, lumbering, metal-plated beast?
The Lego Beast.
Yes, the Lego Beast. And if you're watching, you might assume it's CGI.
Yeah.
But Daisy Ridley was literally the only unmasked human on the set for that shot.
Which is incredible to think about.
The Lego Beast was a colossal, heavy, practical puppet. It had 2 performers inside it, sweating in the desert heat, another actor riding on top, and BB-8 being puppeteered just off camera. It took an entire village of engineers and performers just to shoot a few seconds of desert scenery.
It was a massive flex by the production team. They wanted you to subconsciously feel the weight of these creatures.
And you really do.
Yeah, and they did something similar later in the film with the Hapabor, that giant pig-like creature Finn drinks water next to.
One that knocks him over.
Yeah, that thing required 5 puppeteers inside of it to operate.
5.
5 people. The creature shop actually pitched the design to J.J. Abrams by building it in secret, and during a workshop tour, they just had this massive 5-man pig monster charge out of a side door right at him.
Talk about a bold pitch. Just, here's our monster. Please hire us, and please don't get trampled.
It worked, though.
It did. So, the story propels forward. Rey and Finn escape Jakku on the Millennium Falcon. They run into Han Solo and Chewbacca, and eventually they end up at Maz Kanata's castle, which sets up the third act at Starkiller Base.
And this brings us to the emotional epicenter of the entire film.
The death of Han Solo.
Right. At the hands of his son, Kylo Ren, Han steps out onto that bridge over the abyss, tries to pull Ben Solo back to the light, and Kylo runs him through with a lightsaber.
Such a gut punch.
It is. But what gives this scene its gravity isn't just the shock value. It's the 30 years of real-world history behind it.
Because Harrison Ford had been actively campaigning to have Han Solo killed off since the early 1980s.
Exactly. He argued passionately that Han should sacrifice himself at the end of The Empire Strikes Back and again in Return of the Jedi.
Why did he want him dead so badly?
Well, Ford felt that because Han didn't have the Force, his ultimate utility to the narrative was to give the story profound emotional weight through his death.
That actually makes a lot of sense from an acting perspective.
Right. But George Lucas flatly refused, famously arguing that, you can't sell dead Han Solo toys.
Classic Lucas. Always thinking about the merchandising.
Exactly. But in The Force Awakens, Ford finally won the argument.
And the fact that this didn't leak is a modern miracle.
Yep.
I mean, in an era where every set photo is tweeted instantly, the death of arguably cinema's most famous smuggler stayed a secret.
Relying entirely on the audience's respect for one another not to spoil it.
Yeah. But there's another headline from our sources that adds a bizarre twist to Han Solo's final film. The headline is literally, "Why Harrison Ford breaking his leg was good for Star Wars."
This is where the chaos of production intersects with the creative process in a huge way.
What actually happened there?
So, during filming, a hydraulic door on the Millennium Falcon set malfunctioned and slammed down on Ford, breaking his leg and halting production for weeks.
Which is terrifying for a guy his age.
Absolutely. But you have to wonder how an accident like that physically reshapes a blockbuster.
Did that unexpected hiatus give J.J. Abrams and Lawrence Kasdan the crucial breathing room they desperately needed?
Exactly. Remember, they cobbled that script together in 6 months.
Right. So they essentially got a forced timeout to look at what they had shot and tweak the rest of the film.
They could actually step back and breathe.
It's wild to think a broken bone might have stabilized the narrative of the whole movie.
It really is.
So Han falls into the abyss, the Resistance blows up the superweapon, and Rey defeats a wounded Kylo Ren. And then the movie ends with Rey flying to the oceanic planet of Ahch-To, finding an older, silent Luke Skywalker and holding out his lightsaber.
A literal cliffhanger.
Literally, she's standing on a cliff,
Hmm.
which seamlessly passes the baton to the next director, Rian Johnson, for The Last Jedi.
But as we transition into this middle chapter, we have to look at the state of the narrative that he's inheriting.
Right. Han Solo is dead. The New Republic's capital system has been vaporized by Starkiller Base.
The galaxy is fundamentally destabilized.
And behind the camera, the destabilization is even more pronounced, because Rian Johnson has handed all of J.J. Abrams' meticulously crafted mystery boxes.
All of them. Who are Rey's parents? Why did Luke Skywalker abandon the galaxy? Who is Supreme Leader Snoke?
But the kicker is, J.J. Abrams didn't leave him any answer keys.
It's a terrifying position for a writer to be in.
I would be panicking.
Daisy Ridley actually confirmed in interviews that J.J. Abrams did write rough drafts and outlines for episode 8 and 9. He had a vague roadmap in his head.
Okay, so there was a plan.
Sort of. But when Rian Johnson was hired, Lucasfilm gave him the freedom to start from a completely clean slate.
Wait, really? They just let him ignore it?
Yeah. He read the outlines, but he didn't use them. He threw them out and wrote The Last Jedi from scratch, based solely on the emotional momentum of The Force Awakens.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if you're listening to this and wondering why on earth Rian Johnson didn't just call J.J. Abrams to ask him what the plan was, Well, that's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is.
How do you direct the middle chapter of a trilogy when you decide to ignore the previous director's notes? It feels like building a relay race where the runners refuse to pass the baton.
You do it by looking purely at character psychology. That was Johnson's approach.
How so?
Rian Johnson had to answer the immediate dramatic question posed by the cliffhanger. Why is Luke Skywalker the most optimistic hero in the galaxy, hiding on an island while his friends are slaughtered?
Right, because the Luke we know would rush to help them.
Exactly. For Johnson, the only answer that made dramatic sense, the only answer that didn't make Luke look like a coward, was that Luke fundamentally believed his involvement would make things worse.
Oh, wow.
He had to believe that the Jedi Order itself was a cycle of failure that needed to end.
And that psychological pivot hit Mark Hamill like a freight train.
Oh, it was really hard for him.
He gave that very candid, infamous interview where he said, "He's not my Luke Skywalker." Our sources dive deep into the toll this took on him.
It was a profound struggle for him as an actor.
To cope with this drastically cynical take on the farm boy he created, Hamill couldn't just read the script. He had to invent an entirely separate, brutal backstory for Luke just to mentally prepare for the role.
He had to bridge the gap in his own psyche, between the triumphant Jedi who redeemed Darth Vader and the broken hermit drinking green milk on a rock.
Which takes a lot of mental gymnastics.
It requires immense professionalism to fundamentally disagree with a character's trajectory, but still deliver a performance that raw.
Absolutely. So in the film, Luke reluctantly agrees to give Rey 3 lessons, revealing the crux of his trauma. He sensed the growing darkness in his nephew, Ben Solo.
And in a fleeting moment of pure instinctual fear, Luke ignited his lightsaber over his sleeping nephew.
Just a moment of weakness.
Right. But Ben woke up, saw his master ready to strike, and that single misunderstanding pushed Ben entirely to the dark side, destroying the new Jedi Academy.
And while Rey is trapped on this island dealing with a disillusioned legend, she starts having these sudden, jarring telepathic connections with Kylo Ren.
The Force conversations.
Yeah. They are light years apart, but they can see each other, talk to each other. They even touch hands across the galaxy at one point.
The Force bond. It feels like this profound expansion of Force mythology.
Yeah. It feels deeply mystical.
But our sources reveal the brilliant, purely structural necessity behind it.
Oh, what do you mean?
Rian Johnson realized very early in his writing process that Rey and Kylo were the dual protagonists of this trilogy. The whole story hinged on their dynamic.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the plot of The Last Jedi required them to be physically stranded on completely different planets for almost the entire runtime.
Oh, because she's with Luke, and he's with the First Order fleet.
Exactly. You can't build chemistry or conflict if your leads never share a scene. The Force conversations were invented specifically to solve a structural script problem.
That is incredibly clever writing.
It really is. It allowed them to have intimate, quiet scenes together despite the distance.
And that necessity gave us some of the best character work in the saga. Because of those conversations, we see Kylo Ren's internal mechanics. The Reddit sources, especially the intense analysis from the Reylo community, point out that Rian Johnson and Adam Driver are constructing Kylo as a reverse Vader.
Exactly. Think about the trajectory.
Okay.
Anakin Skywalker was a confident, powerful hero who suffered a tragic, sudden fall from grace into absolute evil.
Right, very sudden.
Ben Solo's arc is inverted. He starts The Force Awakens as an insecure kid playing dress-up in a mask, desperately trying to emulate his grandfather.
He literally throws temper tantrums with his lightsaber.
Yes, but across The Last Jedi, through his interactions with Rey, he shatters the mask. He grows into a hardened, fiercely confident villain who makes his own choices.
Though Johnson is careful to inject deep ambiguity into the ending. Like, is he fully consumed by the dark, or is he just acting out of pain?
Right, he leaves that door cracked open just a bit.
Now, while all this incredibly heavy psychological Force trauma is unfolding, the physical plot of the movie is basically a high-stakes, slow-speed car chase.
Yeah, the fleet chase.
The First Order is tracking the Resistance fleet through hyperspace, slowly bleeding their fuel dry. And the on-set production stories during these fleet scenes are fantastic.
There are some really funny ones.
First, you have Laura Dern playing Vice Admiral Holdo. She's supposed to be this stoic, imposing military leader, but she is such a massive Star Wars fan that she literally couldn't stop herself from saying pew every time she fired her prop blaster.
It's so endearing.
If you zoom in on her face during the mutiny scene, you can visibly see her mouthing the word pew.
It's those moments of sheer joy breaking through a tense production.
Totally.
On the flip side, the physical comedy on the First Order sets got a little too visceral.
Oh, with Dom Gleason?
Yeah, he plays General Hux, and there's a sequence where Supreme Leader Snoke uses the Force to drag Hux across the polished hard floor of the Star Destroyer bridge.
I remember that. He just slides across the floor on his face.
Well, the stuntman performing that drag actually broke his nose on the floor during the take.
Oh my gosh. The glamorous life of a Hollywood stunt performer.
Exactly. It's not all red carpets.
But perhaps the most enduring, heartwarming, behind-the-scenes reality of The Last Jedi is the fingerprints left by the late Carrie Fisher.
Oh, definitely. Carrie Fisher's legacy in Hollywood wasn't just acting. She was an uncredited, highly sought-after script doctor for decades.
She tightened dialogue for major blockbusters everywhere.
She did. And Rian Johnson was smart enough to fully lean on her expertise. She wrote or punched up almost all of her own dialogue in the film to inject it with her specific brand of weary, razor-sharp humor.
Which is so iconic, like when Luke and Leia finally reunite on Crate, this incredibly emotional moment, 30 years in the making. Leia looks at him and says, "I know what you're going to say. I changed my hair."
That was purely Carrie Fisher deflating the tension with brilliance.
She also crafted the goodbye scene between Leia and Admiral Holdo. They both start to say the classic line, "May the Force be with you," and Leia just stops and tells Holdo, "You go. I've said it enough."
It's so natural.
Or earlier in the film, when she demotes Poe Dameron and tells him to get your head out of your cockpit. It is classic Carrie Fisher, biting, loving, and totally human.
Her humor grounded a storyline that was otherwise incredibly dire. Because the climax of this film is a complete subversion of expectations.
Oh, completely.
Rey willingly surrenders to Kylo Ren, utterly convinced she can pull him back to the light, just like Luke did with Vader.
She thinks she's repeating history.
Right. They stand before Supreme Leader Snoke in this visually stunning blood-red throne room. And Kylo does the unthinkable. He uses the Force to ignite a lightsaber through Snoke, cutting him in half.
Just kills the main villain in the middle of the second movie.
Yeah. And then Kylo and Rey team up in this brutal, spectacular, practical, heavy fight against the Praetorian Guards.
The choreography there is amazing.
It is. But when the dust settles, Kylo doesn't turn good. He asks Rey to let the past die, to rule the galaxy with him.
He chooses the dark.
He does. And they fight over Anakin's lightsaber until it literally rips in half.
Which leaves the audience completely unmoored. Meanwhile, the Resistance is cornered on the salt planet of Crate. And this is where we get the Holdo maneuver.
Visually, one of the best moments in the saga.
Admiral Holdo turns her cruiser around and jumps to light speed straight through the massive First Order fleet. The cinematic execution of this is breathtaking because the sound design completely drops out.
It's so jarring in the best way.
It is 10 seconds of absolute jarring silence in a crowded theater, just watching a blinding white tear through space. It buys the Resistance time. And then the ultimate legendary moment. Luke Skywalker walks out alone to face down the entire First Order army with a laser sword.
And Kylo Ren orders every gun to fire on him, but Luke emerges completely unscathed.
He just brushes off his shoulder.
Right. They duel, and Kylo strike them down, only to realize his lightsaber passes right through Luke. He isn't physically there.
He is astral projecting his image across the galaxy from his island.
And the thematic resonance here is brilliant. Rian Johnson notes in his director's commentary that Luke's projection was designed to be the exact thematic opposite of Han Solo's death.
Wait, how so? How are they opposites?
Well, Han died physically confronting Kylo, allowing his son to strike him down in an attempt to reach him. But by projecting himself as a phantom, Luke ensures that Kylo Ren cannot actually commit the physical sin of murdering his master.
Oh, wow. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, he denies Kylo that final soul-destroying act. Luke saves Kylo's soul from the darkest possible deed, buys the Resistance time to escape, and reignites the spark of hope across the galaxy without shedding a single drop of blood.
It is the ultimate expression of the Jedi philosophy.
Exactly. The immense effort of projecting his life force across the stars ultimately kills Luke, but he dies at peace, looking at a binary sunset.
So we reach the end of the middle chapter, and the galaxy is basically a blank slate.
Completely open?
The Resistance fits entirely on the Millennium Falcon. Luke is gone, Snoke is dead, Kylo Ren is the Supreme Leader, completely unhinged. Rey has a broken lightsaber and some ancient Jedi books. The story could literally go anywhere.
Anywhere at all.
And originally, the concluding chapter was supposed to be directed by Colin Trevorrow. the filmmaker behind Jurassic World.
Which brings us to what is easily one of the greatest what-ifs in the history of cinema.
I am so ready for this. The legendary unmade Episode 9X, Duel of the Fates.
It's wild to think about what could have been.
It is. And we have the leaked, verified scripts for this film. It takes its name from John Williams' operatic choral track from The Phantom Menace. This represents a completely alternate timeline for how the Skywalker saga was supposed to end.
Let's dissect the architecture of this alternate universe because it's fascinating.
Please do.
In the script written by Trevor and Derek Connolly, the First Order has locked down the galaxy by shutting down all intergalactic communication, suppressing any chance of a coordinated rebellion.
Makes sense as a villain tactic.
Crucially, in this version, there is absolutely no resurrected Emperor Palpatine. None.
He stays dead.
The big bad of the original trilogy stays dead. He only appears as a pre-recorded message on an ancient Sith holocron.
Okay, so Kylo is the main villain. What about Rey's lineage?
The script maintains the central thesis of The Last Jedi. Rey is a nobody.
Oh, nice.
Her last name is revealed to be Solana. She doesn't have a legendary bloodline. The Force just chose her.
The character arcs here are so radically different it almost makes your head spin. Let's look at Finn, for example.
Finn's arc in this script is incredible.
Because in the movie we actually got, Finn mostly just yells Rey's name a lot. But in Duel of the Fates, Finn and Rose Tico travel to the galactic capital of Coruscant, which has been occupied by the First Order.
Right. They are trying to light a distress beacon in the old Jedi temple to summon allies.
And Finn gets a massive, revolutionary storyline. He battles a First Order stormtrooper designated RK-514. Finn beats him, but refuses to kill him. He spares his life.
Which is a huge moment for him.
Yes. This act of mercy breaks RK-514's conditioning, and it inspires other stormtroopers to drop their weapons and defect. Finn essentially leads a massive, boots-on-the-ground citizen and droid rebellion through the streets of Coruscant.
The thematic weight of that is immense. You are taking Finn's arc, starting as a nameless, brainwashed cog in a fascist machine who only wants to run away, and bringing it to its ultimate conclusion.
He becomes the revolutionary leader who frees his brothers and sisters.
Exactly. John Boyega, who played Finn, was very vocal about this later on. He publicly praised the leaked concept art for Duel of the Fates, expressing deep regret that we never got to see Finn lead a stormtrooper uprising.
It would have tied the class themes of Star Wars together perfectly.
It really would have.
And then there is Kylo Ren. His path in Duel of the Fates is pitch black.
It goes to some very dark places.
He completely refuses redemption. He travels to Darth Vader's abandoned castle on Mustafar, finds Palpatine's Sith holocron, and it directs him to seek out a 7,000-year-old Lovecraftian alien named Tor Valum.
Right, because Trevorrow needed a way to escalate Kylo's dark side powers without relying on Palpatine. Tor Valum supposedly trained Darth Plagueis, the master of cheating death.
So Kylo's journey is one of physical and spiritual degradation.
He actually gets wounded by the holocron and has dark Mandalorian metal physically welded to his face to cover the scars.
That sounds terrifying.
He is consumed by rage. And throughout this entire dark pilgrimage, he is being haunted by the Force ghost of Luke Skywalker.
Luke is just bothering him the whole time.
Pretty much. Luke is relentlessly appearing to him, trying to pull him back to the light, but Kylie just keeps pushing deeper into the dark.
Which leads to a climax on Mortis. And if you know the animated series, Mortis is a deeply mystical realm heavily tied to the raw nature of the Force.
And on Mortis, Kylo drops a devastating emotional bombshell on Rey. He reveals that he was the one who murdered her parents.
What?
He did it on Snoke's orders years ago. They engage in this brutal final duel. Kylo actually blinds Rey with his lightsaber.
He blinds her.
Yes, physically blinds her. But Rey, in her blindness, achieves a Zen state. She embraces both the light and the dark side of the Force to find true balance.
Okay, so she levels up.
Exactly. Kylo, desperate and dying, attempts to drain her life energy to save himself. But in that final moment, Leia reaches out across the stars through the Force to her son's mind.
Oh, just like Luke did.
Yes. The love of his mother finally breaks him. Kylo relents, uses his remaining power to heal Rey, and he dies. Unredeemed for his atrocities, but having managed one final act of compassion.
And how does it end for Rey?
The film would have ended with Rey settling down on a new planet to train a generation of Force-sensitive children that Finn and Rose had rescued.
It is such a distinct, structurally sound ending.
Yeah.
It honors the setup of the previous film. But why did it die on the vine? Why did we get something completely different?
It boils down to a massive behind-the-scenes collision.
Tell me about it.
Colin Trevorrow departed the project over what Lucasfilm euphemistically called creative differences.
Ah, the classic Hollywood excuse.
Right. But the reality was reports of a massive clash with Kathleen Kennedy over the direction of the story. And tragically, the script was turned in just a week before Carrie Fisher unexpectedly passed away.
Oh, that's right, because Leia was the emotional linchpin of Episode 9.
Exactly. Losing her upended the entire narrative architecture. So Disney panics. They hit the emergency glass, fire Trevorrow, and bring J.J. Abrams back to finish the trilogy he started.
And we get the film that actually hit theaters, The Rise of Skywalker.
And Abrams immediately pivots the narrative 180 degrees. If Rian Johnson was about deconstructing the myth, Abrams was about violently reconstructing it.
Yeah, in The Rise of Skywalker, the dead speak. Emperor Palpatine mysteriously returns, somehow, as Poe Dameron famously and exhaustively explains.
Palpatine has been hiding on the secret Sith homeworld of Exegol, aided by a cult known as the Sith Eternal.
Who have inexplicably built a massive fleet of thousands of Star Destroyers armed with planet-killing lasers.
It's a lot to take in.
And in a complete, direct rejection of the core message of The Last Jedi, Rey discovers she is not a nobody at all. She is Palpatine's biological granddaughter.
Right. Her power didn't come from nowhere. It came from the ultimate evil bloodline.
Which turns the movie into basically an intergalactic scavenger hunt. The plot relies heavily on artifacts, or MacGuffins, to keep the characters moving at breakneck speed.
They need to find Exegol, so they need a Sith wayfinder.
And to find the wayfinder, they have to read a clue inscribed on an ancient Sith dagger. But the clue is written in the Sith language, and C-3PO's Ancient Republic programming strictly forbids him from translating it.
It's a very convoluted sequence of events.
It is.
But it does lead to a surprisingly poignant emotional beat. To bypass his programming and translate the dagger, C-3PO has to submit to a complete memory wipe.
That scene is actually really sad.
He essentially sacrifices his identity, his lifetime of memories with these heroes, for the success of the mission. He looks at his friends one last time and says he is taking a final look.
It's a gut punch, though Abrams lessens the blow significantly by having R2-D2 restore a backup of his memory later in the film.
A little bit of a cheat, but yes.
But the real magic trick of The Rise of Skywalker's production is how they handled the tragic reality of Carrie Fisher's death.
They had a very difficult choice to make.
Because they could have taken the easy route. They could have used a CGI recreation of her face, mapped onto a stand-in, exactly like they did with the young Leia at the end of Rogue One.
But J.J. Abrams adamantly refused. He felt it was disrespectful.
So instead, he and his editing team undertook a monumental task. They combed through about 8 minutes of unused, deleted footage of Carrie Fisher from The Force Awakens and a tiny scrap from The Last Jedi.
And they cataloged every single line she spoke, every expression.
And then they wrote the script of Episode 9 around those existing clips.
It is a remarkable piece of cinematic reverse engineering. They built entire scenes, adjusting lighting and eye lines, just to ensure General Leia Organa got a proper, authentic send-off using the actor's real performance.
Astonishing that they pulled that off. And speaking of practical magic, I have to highlight a detail about Babu Frick.
Oh, Babu Frick is
great. He's the tiny, whiskered, fan-favorite alien droid smith who hacks into C-3PO's brain to get the translation. He's entirely a practical puppet.
Right.
And the actress who voiced him, Shirley Henderson, who played Moaning Myrtle in Harry Potter, she didn't just record her lines in a booth. She actually took the time to learn puppeteering so she could physically operate Babu Frick's mouth and facial expressions live on set while speaking the dialogue.
That is amazing. The dedication to tactile craft is truly the one consistent thread throughout all three films.
It really is.
But of course, we have to talk about the thematic culmination of the film, which remains highly debated to this day.
Ah, the romance and ultimate fate of Rey and Kylo Ren.
Yes. The Reddit sources we analyzed show just how intensely this divided the fan base.
The Reylo debate.
Exactly. Fans noted the undeniable, almost magnetic chemistry between Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley from their very first interrogation scene in The Force Awakens.
It was palpable.
In The Rise of Skywalker, the climax rests entirely on their dynamic. Kylo is deeply conflicted. He is finally pushed back to the light by a vision or a memory of his father, Han Solo.
He throws his red lightsaber into the ocean.
He reclaims his identity as Ben Solo and rushes to Exegol to help Rey fight the Emperor.
And Rey ultimately defeats Palpatine by deflecting his lightning, but the sheer effort kills her. She drops dead.
Right. Ben Solo climbs out of a pit, finds her lifeless body, and uses the Force to transfer his own life essence into her, resurrecting her.
And then they share a passionate kiss, smile at each other, and then Ben dies, his body fading into the Force just like his uncle and grandfather.
And this choice, it shattered the fandom into camps.
It really did. We are not taking sides here, but it's fascinating to look at the arguments.
Completely. Critics felt the final kiss and redemption was a massive hard reset. They argued it undermined the complex, irredeemable villain Rian Johnson built in the previous movie.
Right. They felt it was purely fan service, driven by the actors' chemistry, rather than a coherent master plan. It felt, to some, like a betrayal of the narrative stakes.
But the other side of the aisle, the ardent supporters, felt it was the only logically satisfying conclusion to the Skywalker family saga.
Because it completed Kylo's reverse Anakin arc perfectly, right?
Exactly. Anakin turned to the dark side to stop the woman he loved from dying, and he failed. Ben Solo turns to the light side to save the woman he loves from dying, and he succeeds, finishing what his grandfather started.
It's a fascinating debate. And, while the writers changed, the directors feuded, the scripts were literally thrown in the trash and rewritten, and the fans argued over every frame. There was one unifying, steady force holding this entire sequel trilogy and, honestly, the entire 40-year saga together.
The maestro, John Williams.
Yes. Let's talk about the music,
Okay.
because it is so much more than just a soundtrack. Our sources include this incredibly dense study from the Empirical Musicology Review.
It introduces the Star Wars Thematic Corpus, or SWTC.
What exactly is that?
It is a massive digital structural study of John Williams's music across all 9 saga films. The study tracked how, across this massive narrative, Williams composed 64 distinct recurring musical themes or leitmotifs.
We all recognize the Imperial March or the sweeping brass of the Force theme.
Sure. But the SWTC study dives deep into how the music evolved in these chaotic sequel films. Williams didn't just play the greatest hits. He adapted his compositional style to match the psychological complexity of the new characters.
Let's break that down for the listener.
Yeah.
Because terms like musicology can sound a bit dry. How did he actually do that?
Well, the study reveals that for the sequels, Williams leaned heavily into highly sophisticated non-functional harmony.
Okay, stop right there. What exactly is non-functional harmony?
Think of traditional classical music like a sentence with a clear subject, verb, and period. The chords move in a predictable sequence that resolves comfortably.
It sounds complete.
Exactly. Non-functional harmony breaks those rules. The chords shift in unexpected ways. They don't resolve where your ear expects them to.
Oh, interesting.
It creates a feeling of floating, of ambiguity, or unresolved tension. Williams drew deeply on his background as a jazz pianist to achieve this. You can hear it in older themes like Luke and Leia, but it becomes the dominant language in sequel tracks.
Like which ones?
Like the gloomy courtship motif, the music that plays during Rey and Kylo's telepathic connections. The music refuses to settle into a major or minor key, perfectly mirroring their conflicted, dangerous dynamic.
It's like the music is subconsciously doing the emotional heavy lifting that the script intentionally leaves ambiguous.
Precisely.
And what about the villains? Because the music for the First Order feels fundamentally different from Darth Vader's music.
That is where Williams adapted modern minimalist techniques to create terror. The study points out his heavy use of ostinati, drones, and pedal points.
Let's define those, because the effect they have on a theater audience is visceral, but I don't think most people know the terms.
An ostinato is a short, rhythmic pattern that just repeats endlessly, creating a feeling of mechanical, unstoppable motion.
Okay, and a pedal point.
A pedal point is a sustained, often dissonant bass note. Imagine a pedal point like a dark, heavy storm cloud that just hovers in the background of a scene.
Just looming there.
Yeah. Even while other instruments are playing frantic action melodies, that one low, vibrating bass note refuses to leave. It vibrates in your chest. It subconsciously tells your brain that something terrible is happening and you cannot escape it.
That is brilliant.
Williams uses this brilliantly in the theme for Supreme Leader Snoke, which is essentially just a terrifying guttural male choir chanting over a black hole of a bass note.
And he uses the driving ostinati in tracks like TIE Fighter Attack to make the action feel chaotic and modern, right?
Exactly. The score isn't just background noise. It is the structural glue that forces all 3 of these disjointed movies to feel like they belong to the same universe.
So after 3 movies, 3 massive directorial shifts, billions of dollars spent, and countless internet arguments that will probably rage on until the end of time, we reach the end of the Skywalker saga. How do we make sense of it all?
When you synthesize this entire journey from the boardroom to the screen, the sequel trilogy becomes a phenomenal case study of modern storytelling on the grandest scale imaginable.
It really does.
It shows exactly what happens when a massive corporation buys a mythology, refuses to write a master plan, and instead passes a baton between visionary creators with wildly different, often opposing philosophies.
You had J.J. Abrams, who wanted to evoke the warmth of the past and build tantalizing mysteries. You had Rian Johnson, who wanted to violently deconstruct the myth, challenge the character's flaws, and democratize the Force. You had Colin Trevorrow, who wanted a grounded, gritty revolution. And then J.G. came back to tie it all up with a desperate bow of destiny, bloodlines, and massive fleet battles.
It was messy, it was contradictory.
Very contradictory.
But because it lacked a sterilized corporate mandate, it gave us moments of profound cinematic beauty. It sparked fierce fan debates that proved just how deeply these stories resonate with our culture.
And most importantly for film nerds, it gave us an incredibly rare, transparent look at how movies of this colossal scale are truly frantically made.
The friction between these creators, the push and pull of their visions, is exactly what gave the sequel trilogy its unique, chaotic identity.
Which leads me to a final thought for you to ponder as we wrap up. Consider how the very nature of the Force itself is described in these movies. It is a mystical energy field defined by the constant struggling balance between light and dark, between rigid planning and sudden chaos, between being shackled to the past and forging the future.
That's a great point.
Doesn't that perfectly mirror the messy, passionate, and deeply collaborative reality of making these films? Is a perfectly planned, mathematically predictable story always better? Or is there a unique, undeniable magic found only in the chaotic collision of different artistic minds trying to build a galaxy together?
It is a delicate balance, much like the Force itself.
And that wraps our deep dive into the Star Wars sequel trilogy. If you enjoyed revisiting this era of the galaxy with us, follow Roll Credits and share it with your fellow movie fans, and let us know what film we should cover next, old or new. We'll be back soon with more trivia, more movie magic, and maybe a few more journeys to a galaxy far, far away.